Yeah, Amira.
Hi, Matt. So the 620I Foreign Assistance Act actually doesn't have the word arbitrarily. You say it's the law, but the NSM 20, which is a memorandum, has the word arbitrarily. So the Foreign Assistance Act says, when it's made known to the president that the government of such country prohibits or otherwise restricts directly or indirectly the transport of delivery of United States humanitarian assistance, it does not have arbitrarily. So given you are already saying humanitarian assistance is very low and putting in front of Israel a bunch of concrete measures on how to improve it, why are you waiting for another 30 days to implement the law?
Because we believe it's appropriate to give them a chance to cure the problem. And international humanitarian law does make exceptions for certain, I'll give you an example. Dual-use items is a good example. If there are dual-use items that legitimately could be used as a military purpose, of course, governments aren't required to let those dual-use items in, which is not to say that they can use that exception as a blanket restriction on anything that could be used as a dual-use item. For example, if there are military movements happening in a certain period of time, governments can restrict the provision of humanitarian aid during that period, because obviously you wouldn't want to put humanitarian workers at jeopardy. So it is not accurate to say that there can be no restrictions. It's that those restrictions ultimately can't block civilians from getting the humanitarian access that they need. And that is what we're focused on doing. And so we think it's appropriate. Ultimately, what we want to see here is results. This isn't about making a rhetorical statement. It's not about making any kind of threats. It's about seeing the situation reversed. And so that the civilians in Gaza who are not getting adequate access to food and medicine and other humanitarian goods today actually see, as a result of our efforts, a change in their daily lives. And that's what we're focused on achieving, and that's what we are trying to achieve through this letter.
Sure, but I guess what I'm trying to get at, and I'll ask it again, is like, we've been at this for over a year now. You have made these warnings dozens of times, if not more, from this podium. Secretary has done it, President of the United States has done it, and yet we're here. Other outlets have reported, but Reuters has reported all the way back in April that officials from this department have assessed in internal memos that Israel, quote, is persistently and arbitrarily impeding aid in Gaza. So if the law is already being, if it's already doing it, why is the United States waiting?
So first of all, that is not, so we've been over this before, I know, from this podium. There are people that reach that conclusion, and there are people inside this building who reach the opposite conclusion. So I think it's important to state that for the record, that when you have a difficult situation as this, it's not uncommon for people to reach different assessments. Ultimately, if you look at the last year and our record of working to get humanitarian assistance into Gaza, what you've seen is the U.S. intervening at critical moments. Going back to October 12th, let's not forget that it wasn't October, it was October 16th. So just a few days after October 7th, that the Secretary was negotiating with the government of Israel until 2 in the morning in Tel Aviv to get the first trucks into Gaza. I know you were there. And over the coming months have intervened on multiple occasions when we thought the levels of assistance getting in weren't sufficient, when there were policies that needed to be changed, when there are new gates that needed to be opened. We have intervened to get that to happen. And you've seen those results. You've seen us go from 1 crossing being open to 4 crossings being open. And that is the result of U.S. intervention. Now, to answer your question, we have always said that this is an ongoing process. And our assessments are ongoing. They're not static, they're dynamic. And so when the situation changes, our assessments will change and we'll act accordingly. And that's what we're doing.
And how did the Israelis respond to this letter?
They can speak for themselves. I'm not going to speak for them.
Have you received any assurances that they will actually take these concrete measures?
So I'm just not going to speak for them. Those are private diplomatic conversations. They can speak to their reaction.
And one final thing. What is your message to the world when they question U.S. credibility in terms of following through? Because President Biden made a similar threat to cut off or restrict U.S. military aid in April if Israel carried out a major operation in Rafah. Regardless of what you call that operation, Rafah is now like a wasteland. And we have seen one shipment of 2,000-pound bombs being withheld, but everything else, billions of dollars worth of weapons, have continued. So what do you say to people who question the credibility of U.S. in terms of following through?
So first of all, I will say, without getting into all of the details, that not all of the premises of that question are accurate when it comes to the communications between us and the government of Israel. What I will say is, look at our track record of intervening to get humanitarian assistance in, and look at the fact that when we have seen when we have seen Israel not follow through on the steps that they committed to, and when we have seen the results not measure up to the standards that we expect, we have intervened with them to turn those around. And that's what we did in April. And it wasn't just a letter from the secretary, it was also the president making this clear directly to the Prime Minister of Netanyahu that we needed to see changes, and that our policy would be dependent on the changes that they made. And they made those changes. Now, what we also said is that the changes need to be sustained, and the level of humanitarian assistance needed to be sustained. And over time, we've seen the level come down, which is why we are going back in and making clear now that it needs to be reversed.
Oh, sorry, one really final thing.
You already said one more. I have to
Yes.
go ahead.
At the end of that letter, you also talk about establishing a new channel to raise civilian harm incidents, which sounds in a way incredible because it's been over a year. So can you elaborate a little bit on that effort? What kind of a channel you want to establish? And are you saying that, Israelis basically ignored the U.S. in all of the previous communications when U.S. raised its concern about civilian harm?
I'm not going to speak to it beyond the language that's in the letter, other than to say that we continue to see Israel not taking sufficient steps to address civilian harm. And you have to look no further to understand that than the really horrific results over the weekend.